All right, guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. I'm Charlie McGrath, your host. It's the 6th of February, Wednesday. If you're not one of the 50-plus people in the chat room and you want to join them, you can go to wideawakenews.com, click on the microphone on the right-hand side, and that'll take you right into chat. If you want to watch me do the program live, you can access the Justin TV live feed from there. And joining us here in just a minute is David Frank, and I want to give out his website before we get rolling because, as Gary always points out, I'm very weak at at doing this. So it's onevoice.info is the website that I've been provided with, and I'll make sure that's it here in a minute. But onevoice.info. No, Gary and I were talking to David before the break or before the start of the second hour, and he was saying he was listening to the last half hour with Gary and I talking, and he agrees with a lot of the sentiment that the things that are being done are not American ideals, right? They're not what most people would subscribe to if they had a choice. And the crux of the problem is that the people don't get a say in this so-called democracy. The people are cajoled, they're put into a camp, they're led down a path, they're promised everything under the sun, and at the end of the day, the choices that are made that truly represent the United States of America are not made by we the people. Now, some people are going to say, who cares? Who cares? I got football, I got beer, I got the lights on, I got a job. Who cares? I can still get up in the morning. I can go outside. I can do whatever I want to do. And, I don't see this impending tyranny that you're talking about. I don't see what the big deal is with what's happening in our country. You guys are trying to peddle fear. But understand something, that if you can take that position, then you better be ready to accept the consequences of what's happening around this world. Because it's like I said in the last half hour, if you are a member of this empire called America, if you are a silent majority sitting back and saying, I don't care because I can still go golf this weekend, I can still watch an NBA game, and my life isn't changed dramatically. If you can take that position and standpoint, you better be prepared to accept the consequences. And the consequences of killing people in your name around the world is you have enemies now that you didn't know you had, and you might not have had yesterday. So when America becomes a target, not was a target that brought us to the position we're in, when America has built itself into being a target, this is the point where you're going to realize that doing things in your name, it might not matter for a decade. It might not matter for 2 decades. It might not matter for 30 or 40 years. But eventually, we're going to pay the price for what's being done now. We're going to pay the price. We're going to pay the butcher's bill for what these guys that are running the show are doing, again, in our name. Now, let me bring on David because, I haven't had a chance to read your book, David. I told you this during the break, but I did read the About section on Amazon.com, and it's absolutely fascinating. So why don't you give us the title of your book, where we can get it, and verify that onevoicenow.info is the correct website.
Yeah, it's onevoicenow.info, Charlie, and I've got to say again that I just, listening to you and Gary, I just really agree with your sentiment. I really do. And I don't think what's going on in America really represents the American people at all. I don't think that they believe in much of anything that's going on, and that's probably why the majority of the people in this country don't vote anymore. Because, and when you think about it, in order to represent somebody, you have to communicate with them. If you're going to a lawyer, if you need a lawyer and you want that lawyer to represent you, the only way that he can represent you is to communicate with you. Or if you're going to the doctor and you want something done and you want him to represent what you want, you have to communicate with him. I'm 64 years old. I've never been asked my opinion on any issue, and most of the people that I've talked to feel the same way. And That's why we've got to change the system, because the American system isn't working. When you're $16 trillion in debt, and for those of you who don't know what $16 trillion is, very simply, it's 16 million. This is a debt that we will never, ever get out of, and this is a debt that I didn't sign on, and I know that you or your listeners didn't sign on it, but they're looking at us to repay this debt. You know, these are decisions that were made not by representing us, but by representing special interests, and you know, the special interests we're starting to now learn are the corporations. And what's sort of ironic about the whole thing, if you look at the abbreviation of corporations, it's CORPS, which is a corpse, which represents death, and we now have death leading America, and that's why we're in the situation that we're in. We're not going in the right direction. I totally agree with you guys.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt about it, and you know, it's like we had Bev on in the first hour, and you know, talking about voting fraud and potential for complete dismantling of representative government if we go to if we use some of the plans that have been suggested and are trying to be put in place. One small part of it, one small part of the tyranny, the soft tyranny that I talk about sometimes, this soft tyranny that inevitably will manifest as a complete and total dominating state with no, like you said, no representation whatsoever, and truly, oligarchs or power elite, however you want to describe them, are the ones writing legislation and governing this country. It does though seem that at the core, representative republic. This is what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to we are supposed to be the government. We're supposed to be the ones who determine our destiny and the future of the nation. That has been utterly dismantled. It's as if the Revolutionary War never occurred. You talk about $16 trillion in sovereign debt. This is a perfect example of a taxation without representation. This debt isn't being created out of thin air with the will of the people. It's being created out of thin air to be dumped onto the people. Just like I said earlier, just because we don't feel it now doesn't mean this tidal wave isn't coming. So let's talk about now, for the rest of this segment and for the rest of the program, for that matter, about your solution that you have. Because, like I said, I read the preface to the book. It seems very interesting to me that the ideas that you have that you put forward in your book, and it seems somewhat kind of counterintuitive to what we were talking with Bev Harris about, which was more of the use of technology to subvert freedom. And you're talking more about the use of technology to ensure representative government. And I kind of want to break that down a little bit.
Well, we're being misrepresented now. And so, if they aren't doing it right, what we've got to do is do it ourselves. And it just seems to me that people are finally awakening to the fact that Washington's not going to fix our communities, and state capitals aren't going to fix our communities, and most of the city councils aren't going to fix our communities. When out of 300 million people or brain cells in America, you rely on 535, what you've got is a brain-dead system. The goal is to use as many brain cells as possible so that we can start fixing these problems from the ground up, because we've learned that top-down systems, whether it be in America or any other country, top-down systems benefit the people at the top. And if you look at where America is now, where 5% of the population now owns 80% of the wealth, that means 95% of us are fighting over the 20% that's left. And that's why, people are losing their homes, and prisons are full, and society is in chaos, because it's sort of like taking 10 hungry people and putting them at a table and putting enough food around that table for two people. It's only a matter of time till we start fighting over that food, and that's what's going on in America right now. But the politicians have already figured this out. What they've been doing is they've been remapping America for a long time with gerrymandering. I'm sure you know what gerrymandering is, but for those that don't, gerrymandering is remapping a district so that a politician can either get elected or reelected.
Right.
So they've been remapping America for a long time to benefit themselves. The Postal Service has remapped America with zip codes so that they could be more efficient at delivering the mail. The phone company has remapped America with area codes so that we could communicate better. The American people have to start figuring it out, and we have to remap America also. Through satellite and computer technology, it's now possible to remap America so that it looks like a honeycomb. And the reason that you want it to look at like a honeycomb is if you look at God's creature that's most responsible for making the world a beautiful place, it's a honeybee. That's where we get our flowers and things like that. And you'll notice that if you look at a honeybee stores the fruits of its labor in a honeycomb. And if you take a close look at a honeycomb, you'll realize that for whatever reason, the honeycomb is made up of hexagons. And it's now possible to remap America, and your community will now look like a hexagon. What we can do is the nucleus of that hexagon will be a local issues television and radio channel, so that instead of relying on politicians to solve our problems in our communities, people in your community that have ideas to make your education system better, your tax system, your environment, whatever it is, they can present their ideas directly to the community over the local issues television and radio channel. We can debate those ideas and videotape those debates and present that to the community over our local issues television and radio channel. People can then pick up any touch-tone phone and use it as a voting device. Your phone will now be your new key to the city. And when you see an issue that you're interested in, you can pick up any touch-tone phone, call a local number. Your call will go into a community computer that will have your citizen participation identification number. It will verify you as a voter with an ID number and a PIN number, ask what issue number you'd like to vote on, press 1 for yes, 2 for no, count your vote, block you out from voting more than once, and we can now have decisions made of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we'll implement those ideas in our community. When we find things that work in our community, we'll share that information with 999 other communities. When they find things that work in their community, they'll share it with us, and we can now start rebuilding America from the ground up, not the top down, because top-down systems are just multi-level marketing pyramid scams. We send our money to these guys, we wait for them to send it back, never comes back. Same thing with state capitals, and the same thing happens with the local city councils and county councils. So instead of government being a place where great ideas go to die, our new system is going to be one where great ideas go to thrive.
I definitely like what you're saying, especially with more hands-on, more people taking action to determine to have a say in an outcome. I guess, Mike, and for those of you wondering why we didn't go to break, Brett sent a message that there was a computer glitch and they didn't auto-fire the break, so we're skipping it and we're going to go till 27 after. But on the subject, or on the idea of like using technology, calling in, using a number, making sure nobody can vote more than once, is there, there's naturally going to be some concern, I would think, for the misuse of technology. Is there, in your book, you probably, like I said, I hope I get a chance to read it, but I haven't yet. I'm sure you've answered this question, and I'd like to know, how do we fight that, other than, like you call in on a referendum, you're marked down as a vote, and that's it, you're done. Is there the same kind of precinct setup where we have now, where we have a referendum, we have actual, we use some technology, but we have actual human beings that are verifying votes?
Well, right now this technology is already being used by the banks and the credit card companies and other corporations too. When you call in, you can check your balance and things like that and move money around. And it's the same technology. They're using it to capture our money, but what we're going to do is use that same technology to capture people's voices.
Yeah. Well,
and keep in mind, I'm sorry, but keep in mind, if it was really that easy to sort of compromise the system, I'd be running into your checking account right now because I know mine's broke, and I'd be taking your money out. But and it does happen. But you got to realize that we're not really talking about money now. We're talking about a vote on maybe a busing issue, education issue, a tax issue, whatever it is. And we've got to stop judging people, and we've got to start judging issues. And this will allow our society to start to evolve into adulthood. One of the problems that we have in our society today is that it's immaturing. In fact, I heard a guy being questioned in prison what it was like being in prison, and he answered by saying, it's like being with children in adult bodies. And because of the fact that we're stuck with this old system where we have 535 adults in Washington and 150 in state capitals and 9 or so on a city council, the question is if they're the adults, what are the rest of us?
Yeah, no doubt. We're treated as if we're wards at this point, Well, so go ahead.
We're like children. We're treated like we're children. Just sit down, shut up, pay your money, go get a six-pack and a pizza, and we'll handle things for you. Well, when we graduated from high school, there was that moment of fear that we all remember, like, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to be evolving to a point where all of a sudden I'm going to be making decisions, and I'm going to live with those decisions. Well, that never really happened. We might have been able to decide where we live or how to organize our living rooms or where we're going to go to work. But outside of issues like that, the kind of world that we really want to live in, we've never been asked. And what
Right.
this will do is allow us to start really rebuilding our communities the way we want them built. And like I said earlier, to stop being misrepresented.
Is the plan, is the premise, obviously it's local, but we have to have more say what happens nationally, right? Because this is where the 16 trillion, these 535 members of Congress this is where the problem lies. Is they'll say one thing in front of the cameras, behind closed doors, they'll vote on legislation, they'll add verbiage to legislation that creates all kinds of debt and war and all kinds of things that most people had a chance to vote on that absolutely say, no way on earth, not in my name. So, I like the local approach of it, but do we not have to break the stranglehold that Washington, D.C. has over all of us?
Yeah, and that's what would happen. And once you start doing it in your community and everybody starts doing it in their community, all of a sudden we as a people are able to say no. We don't really need them to do our thinking for us any longer. And that's what we have to do. We have to start thinking for ourselves and deciding what kind of world that we want. What it's like cutting off the nourishment to the cancer that's killing us. And we can do it one of two ways. We can do it like they're doing it in the Middle East, and that's chaos and that's hell. And until they come up with a plan to replace what they've got with something better, and that's what we're talking about right now. Because the thing is if America does this, the rest of the world is waiting for America to lead. The people that we're afraid of, we're not afraid of the Chinese people. We're afraid of the Chinese leaders. We weren't afraid of the Russians during the Cold War. We were afraid of the Russian leaders. These guys are stricken with the deadliest drug known to mankind, and that's power. And whenever you give anybody, and it could be you or me, if you or I were in that situation, we'd be as dysfunctional as the rest of the leaders around the world. But what we've got to do is we've got to get a plan out to not only people in America, but people around the world, because without a plan, you fail. And what we haven't had is we haven't had a plan. The politicians are never going to come up with this. We'll sit here till hell freezes over. They don't want to give up their couple $100,000 a year and their the money that they're getting under the table from the lobbyists and the media in their faces, and them living a life that isn't even real. They don't live in the real world.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about that, and there's truly no representation, even with 535. And the sick part of that is still too much influence on an agenda. And I'll talk about that when we come back. We're going to take this break. We'll be back in just a few minutes with more Wide Awake News Radio. And David Frank, his website is onevoicenow.info. We'll be right back. Guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Charlie McGrath joined by David Frank. His website is onevoicenow.info. And we're talking about his book, 300, let me get this title wrong, I better read it, 300 Million Minds Changing America, Piece by Piece, with the first piece being a piece like a puzzle, and the second piece being a piece that we all want and we desperately like to achieve. I was talking before the break, that representative government has been on local things, right? If we're talking local matters, it seems that, we still have a say. We can still, in our county, in our state, perhaps, have issues. And some states even do referendums on certain things in order to achieve an outcome. But it seems like on a national level, it is controlled from on high. And by on high, I'm referring, of course, to special financial interest, the military and security industrial complex, absolutely dominating those 535 members of Congress and whatever administration happens to be in there, to the point that it is that we, the people, have absolutely no say in who we invade, who gets killed, who lives, who dies, who succeeds and who fails. It's all made from Washington, D.C., and these decisions are made based solely on money. And recently we saw, with this debate a year ago on the debt ceiling, when they wanted to bring it from just over 12 trillion to 14.5 trillion, that we had this crisis, right? This is how we like to govern in this country, and the West, for that matter, is governed by crisis. Shock the system and then offer a solution, which inevitably will end up being a burden on the people. But we saw this this crisis event, degenerate to the point where we were trying to be sold the notion that 535 members of Congress is too many. We need to whittle this down even further to 12 members of a super Congress plus the president. So we're trying to, on the level of power elite, they're trying to reduce the representative government even further than we have now. I want to know, in your opinion, at what point can we implement this kind of real serious change to the system? Is it only, obviously, the attack on freedom is blatant. The attack on people having any sovereignty over their self or their future is blatant. This attack is real, and it's here, and it's every single day. Do we have to be led into the ultimate crisis before we wake up and realize that a change is not only a good idea, it's absolutely mandatory?
There is no freedom today, Charlie. When you think about everything in our lives, everything is taxed. Everything. Now they're talking about legalizing marijuana, and they want to, all of a sudden, it was so bad for so long, and now it's going to be okay because they're going to tax the seller and the grower and the buyer, and as long as they get their piece of the action. And remember, that piece of the action, that term was coined from the mafia. They got a piece of the action, and we don't have any more of the action to give them. And that's why we've got to start thinking out of the box. We can't keep doing what we've been doing. People are losing their homes, they're losing their lives because they can't afford health care. They can't afford, they just can't afford to live anymore. So what we've got to do is we've got to take it back, and we've got to realize that they aren't going to come up with the idea to fix America. They're the ones that destroyed America. I became an activist about 23 years ago. I used to do a radio program here called Stand Up America, just outside of the University of Notre Dame. And I became an activist when I first heard about NAFTA. And when I heard that they were going to give tax incentives to corporations so that corporations would start using slaves in other countries and destroy good jobs in America, I could not believe that everyone in America wasn't upset and appalled and didn't stand up and go absolutely crazy. We used to be the most productive country in the world, and these 535 people decided that it would be good for America if all of a sudden we did away with the good jobs here and promoted slavery. And this was after we had a civil war in America. And this is what these guys did. And then the next reason that I became an activist was when I saw what happened in Waco, when they used military equipment that we the people pay for through our taxes on innocent men, women, and children, and they burned almost 100 of them alive, and the American people didn't go crazy.
Well, and this is the proverbial frog in the pot, right? I mean, NAFTA, which definitely, we're going to export, quote, expensive labor, and we're going to send it to the Pacific Rim for slave labor, and then we're going to import the goods and borrow money from the nation that made the goods so we can go further into debt. And in that whole cycle, right, that whole cycle of exporting high-paying jobs, importing low-waged products, the only person who benefits, that nobody, your neighbor doesn't benefit. Your neighbor, no. The special corporate interests that drove NAFTA, right? They received bonuses unlike ever before. They received compensation unlike ever before. But here we are, a few decades later, with nothing. I mean, an eviscerated manufacturing base, and the prospect of growing our way out of any financial crisis. Well, that's in China now.
Yeah, and China was meant by the New World Order to be the new prototype for the rest of the world. But the thing that we have now is we have something that nobody's ever had before us, and we have an opportunity to change this whole thing because they've never had the communication technology that we now have, and it's so miraculous. I mean, I'm so old, I used to look at a black and white TV and think, wow, that's really amazing. And now you can give a 10-year-old one of these iPhones, and you can take the smartest politician on the planet, and you put him next to a 10-year-old with an iPhone that has access to every library in the world, and that kid is a genius. Yeah. So what do we need these guys for? They've destroyed our country. Let's just face the fact that they're dysfunctional. They've done a horrible job. Go away. We're going to do it ourselves. The only way that we're going to ever fix America is if each community fixes each community. And if we do that, the next thing we know, America will be fixed. And that's what we have to do. We have to stop believing that the fix is in Washington. You don't fix anything from the top down. You fix it from the ground up. I used to play a little football, and I don't care how big that guy was out on the field. If you hit him low enough, he's going down. And what we have to realize is if you want to pull the ladder from the people at the top, you don't pull the ladder from the top. You pull it from the bottom. And when you think about it, look, we're voting on American Idol, we vote on CNN, we vote on Fox, we vote on Dancing with the Stars. So, let's just vote on issues that affect our lives. And on top of that, we've got the travel channel, we've got the food channel, we have the sports channel. We have all these different channels now. We don't have the most important channel. And the most important channel will be the local issues television and radio channel. And it's not only going to be a great way to come up with great ideas to fix our community and our country, but it's going to be interactive where the ideas that are decided aren't coming at us, they're coming from us. And we can live with those ideas. I sort of relate it to smoking cigarettes. If you want to quit smoking cigarettes, if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, you ought to quit smoking cigarettes, you're going to look at them and say, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. But if all of a sudden you look in the mirror one day and you go, you know what, I think I'm going to quit smoking cigarettes. That's when you quit smoking cigarettes. And when the American people realize that nobody's going to fix this for them, they've got to start fixing it themselves. All you've got to do is put the right tools in place. Dave Frank doesn't have the answers to fixing America, and Obama doesn't, and Mitt Romney doesn't. There's not one person that knows what 300 million people know.
Right. No doubt about it. Hey, and let's continue this after the break. I want to talk how we implement this. I want to talk, how do we make this change? Who do we talk to? Give us some framework. We're going to be back in just a minute with David Frank, author of 300 Million Minds, Changing America Piece by Piece. We'll be right back. Man, oh man, we're having a conversation during the break. Gary Hendershot along with David Frank, and they're talking about the glory days. I apparently missed them because I grew up primarily in the 80s, and it was a Cold War generation then, and they were talking about the happy days where we come out of World War II, before Vietnam, before Korea, and we're an industrial juggernaut. Everything built that was in your home was built in this country. And, over the last 50 years, we've seen this just completely and utterly dismantled. But David Frank, you bring up a good point. Also, you brought up another good point during the break, which is everybody, especially in this community, the activist community, if you will, they know the problems, right? And, there's plenty of people like me out there telling the people what the problems are, commenting on what the problems are. But you tell us that we have a solution and it's right before us. Listening to you tonight, I have absolutely no doubt that the use of technology in order to link like minds together, or to at least have the free exchange of information and ideas, is 100% possible. We're doing it right now. And this is something that even a decade ago would not have been achievable, having a video interview via something called Skype, going to somewhere in Virginia, then being transferred to somewhere in Pennsylvania, and then being put out to the whole world via the internet. So technology is certainly there. How do we implement this change? How do we implement these ideas with the thought of safeguarding the people's will in mind?
The politicians and the old machine is going to keep cooking along as long as one thing happens. As long as we're all thinking different things, as long as we're all involved in different issues, they've got us. Because if we're separated, if we're fighting each other out on our front lawns, they're going to stay in our houses and steal from us.
Divide and conquer. It's the oldest political game in the book.
Absolutely. And what we've got to do is we've just got to come up. The thing that scares them the most is if we all start thinking the same thing at the same time, all of a sudden we've got them. And all I've got is the tools so that we can start resolving our issues, not politically, because we know that politically they don't have the answers. We start really resolving the issues of the people, by the people, and for the people. This is what our founding fathers wanted 235 years ago, but they didn't know what paper clips were, they didn't know what rubber bands were, and they definitely didn't know what a television, a touch-tone phone, and a computer is. So, once we realize that the tools that we need are right at our fingertips, and all we've got to do is put the tools together, you go up to somebody and go, hey, you got a TV? Yeah, I got a TV. You got a touch-tone phone? Yeah, I got a touch-tone phone. Well, I got an idea. Instead of some politician making decisions for you, why don't you just watch issues that might concern you over your TV, and you can vote by phone? Wow, that's simple. And that's what we need. We need a good, simple idea. And once people start realizing that if they just take the system that I'm pushing, all I did was put the components together. That's all I did. If you take a television, a touch-tone phone, and a computer, and you put those components together, we've got a communication system that we've never had before. We had to rely on 535 guys that we know are taking bribes from special interests, and we know that, look, you don't have to be a lawyer or a judge to know this. If someone judging an issue, like a judge on a bench or a juror or a politician, if they ever take a bribe to render an answer to an issue like they're doing in Washington, they will always take that money to render the wrong answer. And that's why when you look at education, our education system in America, it's in the toilet. You look at the tax system in America, it's in the toilet. You look at the environment in America, it's in the toilet. The judicial system, the penal system, all of the systems within the systems are dysfunctional, because when you have a dysfunctional system, overall system, everything else is dysfunctional, including the society in which that system is running. Right. And that's why you look at society today, and it's just, people are depressed, and people are immature, and people are committing crimes. So anyway, what we have to do is all start thinking the same thing at the same time. And the plan is, we've got a website, like I said, onevoicenow.info. On the solution page, it explains how an issue can go right through your community. It's also in my book. The name of the book is called 300 Million Minds, Changing America Piece by Piece. But once you have an idea in hand, you can then go to the people that run your community, the people in the city council, for example. If you can just find somebody that's there for the right reason, and they aren't there just to fill their pockets. If you find that one person, use that person's to use his bully pulpit to bring this idea to the community. And across America, we've got this thing called public broadcasting that we all pay for. The government pays for it with our tax money, and then we donate money to it. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to start using public broadcasting as our local issues television and radio channel, and we're going to use that to actually broadcast the public. Right, your ideas going right to the public, not to the politicians, because like I said earlier, great ideas, the government is where great ideas go to die. We want those great ideas going directly to the public. Let's get people involved in talking about it and debating it, looking at it from all different perspectives, educate the community on the issue. We use a 10-day period where these issues go through one right after the other. And then people that are interested will vote on it. And what will happen is the same thing that happened in the legal industry and the medical industry in this country. It used to be there might be a small town doctor that knew a little bit about different things, but he didn't know very much about any particular thing. And over the years, when more and more people got involved, all of a sudden specialization started happening. So if you have a heart problem, you go to a heart doctor. If you have a hand problem, you go to a hand doctor, an eye problem, so on and so forth. Right. What will happen in your communities, instead of relying on 9 goofballs that sit on the city council or 7 people that sit on the school board, all of a sudden with this system set up, you might have 25,000 people that start raising, debating, and voting on issues to make your education system better. You might have 25,000 people that start raising, debating, and voting on tax issues. You might have 25,000 people that start raising, debating, and voting on environmental ideas. And you start implementing those ideas in your community, making your community better and better. And like I said earlier, when you find things that work in your community, you share it with other communities, 999 other communities around the country. And when they find things that work, they share it with you, and we start rebuilding America from the ground up.
And I'm having a little audio issue here, and I heard you. It was just a little watery. And I listen. The premise I like. I like the fact of people being involved. If we were more involved, we certainly wouldn't be in the position we are. Now, we also wouldn't be in the position we are if we didn't decide to eliminate the controls on government that were given to us from the get-go. This is government of, by, and for the people, and nothing else. It is set in writing in a nation of laws. The power of the government, federal, state, local. Every state has its own constitution. We certainly have a dismantled constitution at the federal level. But the ability of shoddy democracy is what I believe has led to this majority rule, this destruction of what individual sovereignty and individual freedom was all about in the first place. Being involved is critical. Without an input, without a feeling that that you are involved in your own future and the destiny of this nation. And it starts in the destiny of your household, the destiny of your block, the destiny of your street, of your city, of your county, of your state, all the way up to the federal level. If without that involvement, we end up with what we have exactly right now, which is people who just feel dominated, frustrated, taxed to death, imprisoned to death, sold down the river to death, thrown in debt to death, to the point where they just want to bury their hand and trudge through to the next day, and hopefully they'll have enough to pay the man come the end of the month. David, my thought is this, and I've talked about this on the program before, and I'll be brief because we only have a couple of minutes left, that the inevitable that I see on the horizon is a complete and utter collapse of this system, a complete and utter collapse of our political system, a collapse of our financial system. I think our moral compass is already off kilter. But we need to have people like you. We need to have people that are saying before it comes falling apart, what brought us to the position we're in and what can we do to change it? A system like that you're advocating tonight, this participation and people really controlling their own future and their own destiny, I believe it's a potentially beautiful thing, but it's not going to happen, I'm afraid, until after we go through this crucible, after we go through some kind of a tremendous wake-up call, some tremendous shock to the average person. So I think it's critical that we have people like you thinkers out there that are sharing these notions and ideas and showing that there's a better way. I'm pessimistic on the idea that the powers elite, the power structure, the powers that be are going to let us get anywhere close to this without fighting it tooth and nail, fighting it to the grave, because it would be, fighting it to their political grave.
Well, keep in mind, there's 535 of them and there's 300 million of us.
Great point.
And I'll tell you what, and it's funny how, you look at some of these guys that were in Congress and, they don't do anything while they're in to really talk about the dysfunctionality of the system. But as soon as they get out and they've got their pensions and they've, raped the American people, then they talk about, we need to change the system. It's so bad. But what we've got to do is we've got to get this idea out to as many people as possible, because it is going to cave in. That's what the fiscal cliff is really all about, because once that fiscal cliff happens, then you've got chaos, and that's when people bring their guns out. They start fighting over food and things like that. So what we need is to get a plan out to them before that happens.
I agree, and chaos is what's coming. And order out of chaos is what they will attempt to do. The power structure that currently is in place offer you order out of chaos, but we cannot let them, because that order isn't order, it is subjugation. All right, David Frank, website, onevoicenow.info, and the book, you can get it through that website or at Amazon, 300 Million Minds, Changing America, Piece by Piece. David Frank, thank you very much for coming on and spending an hour with me. I appreciate your point of view, and I appreciate you sharing this information with us tonight.
Thank you, Charlie. Great to be on with you.
All right, man. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, please enjoy Jeff Renz, because he's coming up next. Tomorrow night, I'll be back here, of course, with Eric Lovely and Liam Schiff, hour number 2. We'll see you tomorrow night. Have a good night. Peace.